Nicosia should commit to sharing 20% of any net revenue or gas from any offshore hydrocarbon resources with Turkish Cypriots, possibly distributed through a UN-supervised arrangement, as long as both parties remain formally committed to reunification. That is the main idea proposed by the International Crisis Group in its latest report under the title Aphrodite's Gift: Can Cypriot Gas Power a New Dialogue? Alexandra Voudouri spoke with Hugh Pope, project director for Turkey and Cyprus at the International Crisis Group, also on the issue of the Cyprus talks. She began by asking him which of the proposals suggested by the group would be the most feasible, taking into account that the talks between the two sides are facing yet another impasse.
The talks that have been going on since 2008 have reached a natural end of the cycle, and we're looking for what will happen next. And quite obviously, the Cypriot side and the Turkish side are taking unilateral moves on exploration for and the potential development of gas reserves around Cyprus, which now seem to be quite significant. And if they continue in this unilateral way of doing things, we've had a close look at it, talked to lots of international oil people, and it seems that, as is so often with the Cyprus problem, neither side wins anything, and actually it's going to be very expensive. And we propose that various interim things, and the main proposal that we have is that the two sides need to cooperate. I mean, this is not about a zero-sum game. This is currently a lose-lose situation that both are in, and it doesn't need to be like that. There is a very obvious prize that the Greek Cypriot side can make a much better deal with major companies which are much stronger and will have a much better market for the gas in the context of a settlement. And likewise, if Turkey doesn't reach out to the Greek Cypriots and find some way to make the Greek Cypriots feel safe enough and trusting enough to build their main export pipeline to Turkey, which is the main obvious place for the gas to go, then the Turkish side will see no benefit from this either.
The report suggests that Turkey should stop using threatening rhetoric and naval maneuvers inside Cyprus' exclusive economic zone, even if they dispute its limits. The question is, which do you believe that will be the motives for Ankara to stop such a behavior?
Well, the official reason that Turkey is making these threatening moves and threatening implicitly that any oil company working with the Greek Cypriots will never work in Turkey again, those kinds of moves are being made on the basis that the Greek Cypriot side is developing the Aphrodite field on its own with no reference to the inherent rights of the Turkish Cypriots. So what we say is, why doesn't the Republic of Cyprus simply say, we pledge that 20% of the revenues or the resource will be put aside or given to the Turkish Cypriot side once there is revenue or the gas comes out of the ground. And that would remove any justification for Turkey to make these threatening moves, at least in the context of the Aphrodite fields. That's the balance we see that the two could find to, at least in the short term, avoid any possibility that there would be any accidents or physical interventions on the gas development.
You also suggest that pumping the Cypriot gas to Turkey and on to the EU would be a much better option politically and possibly economically. However, doesn't this spell an over-dependence of Turkey as an energy hub? Secondly, how easily will Israel accept this?
One of the things we discovered while doing the research is that actually the Israeli-Cypriot connection isn't that strong. Yes, Noble Energy, the company that's exploring and developing on both sides of the EEZ line, is the same company, and there's certain cross-ownership potentially on the Israeli Cypriot side of an Israeli company. But the main thing that would have changed would have been the idea that Israeli gas could come to Cyprus for processing. And that now seems quite unlikely to happen because no country has ever actually sent its gas to another country to be processed. It's too expensive an investment, it's too strategic a resource. All countries like to keep it to themselves, which leaves Cyprus a bit on its own with the development of the gas. And the reason that it's economically much cheaper to do the pipeline is two reasons. First of all, when the gas comes to Cyprus, to export it, you have to build a liquefaction plant. And the amount of gas that there is in Aphrodite is enough for what's known as one train of a liquefaction plant, which costs anything between $5 and $10 billion. To make money on a gas project, typically everywhere else in the world, is that you need 2, 3, or 4 trains to really make money, which is why Nobel quite sensibly wanted to bring Israeli gas over to Cyprus. The Cypriot side is faced with the fact that if it does a development without a settlement, in a situation where there's going to be some hostility from Turkey, it's going to be done probably without the participation of oil majors who will prefer to keep their business in Turkey to the potential business in Cyprus. So therefore you'll probably be dealing with secondary companies, perhaps not with the best technology. The financing of it, which has to be raised on the international markets, remember, Cyprus has no money left, Noble has no money, so it will have to be raised from banks in the context of Turkish hostility and absence of a settlement and an economically proposition for a one-train LNG plant is going to be very expensive. That's the risk that the Greek Cypriots face if they don't do a pipeline to Turkey, which will cost about 10% of what an LNG plant will take. And even if you build an LNG plant, you have to have a market. You're always bound politically to your customers. In the context of selling to Turkey, and that would have to be after a settlement of the Cyprus problem, you're going to be dealing with major oil companies. But at the same time, 30% of Israel's oil is coming through Turkey to the Ceyhan terminal from Azerbaijan. And nobody's ever mentioned disrupting that because it's embedded in such solid international agreement.
It seems that this month will define whether there will be a continuation of the Cyprus talks. Do you believe that the call for a multilateral meeting will be an option, or that efforts should be concentrated from now on how talks could continue during the Cyprus EU presidency?
I think the talks, which started with such high hopes in 2008 when President Christofias was really seen to be a man who could reach across the line to the Turkish Cypriot leader Mehmet Ali Talat, and they started talking and they made some initial gains. All the high hopes of that period have now gone, and I don't think that there's any chance in the current circumstances with such little agreement to point to, the Republic of Cyprus side is going to agree to an international conference. And if the Greek Cypriots aren't at the table, then it's not really a conference, is it? And there's not much point in doing it, and it won't happen. And I think at that point, this round will probably pause, especially the Turkish side is reluctant to do much during the next 6 months of the Republic of Cyprus presidency of the EU. But we've had lapses before. This is the fourth major round of talk. No one is getting hurt here. I think that we'll pause, and then once people have reconsidered their positions, perhaps after presidential elections in Cyprus next year, when there may be a new leader with new ideas, then perhaps everyone will look again and see what can be done. It's going to be interesting to see if anyone can really revitalize the traditional UN Good Offices mission of a bicommunal, bizonal federation. That seems like there's been no way untried to make that work, and it hasn't panned out.